The sun shone brightly upon the fields, painting the landscape in hues of gold and green. The air was sweet with the scent of freshly tilled earth and the promise of a bountiful harvest. Thomas, a man weathered by seasons of toil, worked diligently, his brow creased with focus as he tended to his crops. He had known these fields all his life, his ancestors before him, their roots running deep within the soil. The village, nestled amongst the rolling hills, was a picture of tranquility. Children's laughter echoed through the air as they chased each other through the marketplace. Women, their voices a gentle murmur, traded stories as they went about their daily chores. The rhythm of life was steady, predictable, like the turning of the seasons. Thomas paused, wiping the sweat from his brow, a sense of contentment washing over him. He looked to the sky, a clear azure expanse stretching endlessly above, and offered a silent prayer of thanks. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more tales of wisdom and wonder. As the day wore on, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere. The air, once fresh and vibrant, grew heavy with humidity. The laughter of children faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Above, the once clear sky began to darken, the azure canvas now marred by ominous streaks of grey. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees with an uncharacteristic urgency. Thomas, sensing the change, paused in his work. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He had seen such storms before, sudden and violent, capable of unleashing nature's fury upon the unsuspecting land. He scanned the horizon, his gaze drawn to the billowing clouds now gathering momentum, their edges tinged with an unnatural purple. The wind howled through the fields, whipping the crops into a frenzy. Dust devils danced across the landscape, harbingers of the approaching tempest. In the village, shutters were drawn and doors were barred. Mothers called their children inside, their voices tight with worry. The storm was upon them. The heavens opened, unleashing a torrent of rain that lashed down upon the land. Rivulets of water snaked through the fields, quickly swelling into raging torrents. The river, usually a gentle giant, meandering lazily through the valley, roared its fury as it breached its banks. The floodwaters rose with terrifying speed, engulfing homes, shops, and everything in their path. The villagers, caught off guard by the ferocity of the storm, scrambled for safety. Rooftops became islands of refuge as the relentless waters continued to rise. Cries of fear and desperation filled the air, swallowed by the deafening roar of the flood. Thomas watched in horror as his fields, his livelihood, disappeared beneath the murky depths. The water swirled around his ankles, icy cold and relentless. He knew he had to reach higher ground, had to escape the rising tide, but fear, paralyzing and cold, rooted him to the spot. Thomas, grab my hand!" A voice cut through the roar of the floodwaters. Jacob, Thomas's neighbor and lifelong friend, waded towards him, his face etched with concern. He extended a hand, his grip strong and sure. "Come on, man, we have to get out of here!" Jacob shouted above the din. But Thomas hesitated, his gaze fixed on the swirling waters. The water was now waist-deep, the current pulling at him with increasing strength. "I can't," Thomas choked out, his voice barely audible above the storm. "I can't leave my farm." Jacob stared at him, incredulous. "Your farm?" "Thomas, your farm is gone. You'll be gone too if you don't come with me now." But Thomas shook his head, his grip on the porch railing tightening. He couldn't bring himself to let go, to abandon the only life he had ever known. Jacob, seeing the stubborn set of his friend's jaw, knew it was useless. He shouted one last warning, his voice filled with despair, before turning and battling his way towards higher ground. The floodwaters continued to rise, now chest-high and swirling dangerously around Thomas. He clung to the porch railing, his body battered by debris swept along by the current. Through the driving rain, he saw a shape emerge from the deluge. It was a boat, a small wooden fishing vessel, manned by two figures struggling to keep it afloat amidst the raging torrent. "Thomas, Get in the boat!" one of the figures shouted, his voice barely audible above the roar of the water. It was Samuel, the village carpenter, his weathered face creased with concern. He maneuvered the boat closer, battling against the current with every ounce of his strength. "There's room for you here," Samuel yelled, gesturing towards the small space in the boat. But Thomas shook his head, clinging to the porch railing with white knuckles. "No," he gasped, fear constricting his throat. "I can't leave my farm." Samuel stared at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Your farm? Man, this is madness. You'll drown!" But Thomas was unmoved, his stubbornness fueled by a mixture of fear and a desperate, illogical hope that the floodwaters would recede. Samuel, seeing the futility of his efforts, shook his head in defeat. With a heavy heart, he turned the boat away, navigating the treacherous waters in search of other survivors. Section 6. Wings of Mercy. The storm raged on, the rain showing no signs of abating. Darkness descended, enveloping the flooded landscape in an eerie silence punctuated by the roar of the water and the mournful howling of the wind. Thomas, now perched precariously on the roof of his farmhouse, watched in despair as the floodwaters continued their relentless ascent. Suddenly, a beacon of light cut through the darkness. A helicopter, its rotors churning furiously against the wind, hovered overhead. A spotlight pierced the gloom, illuminating Thomas's desperate figure clinging to the rooftop. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker, amplified but distorted by the storm. "This is the National Guard. We're here to help. Get to the highest point and we'll lower a rescue basket." Thomas looked up, his heart pounding in his chest. Salvation! But then his gaze fell upon the swirling waters, upon the remnants of his farm disappearing beneath the murky depths. He shook his head, a strangled cry escaping his lips. "No, I can't leave my farm!" he shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the wind and the deafening whir of the helicopter blades. The rescue crew, their faces grim in the harsh light of the spotlight, tried again and again to coax him into the basket, but Thomas was resolute. He would not, could not, abandon his home. Section 7. The Deluge. The storm reached its crescendo, the wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the roof beneath Thomas's trembling fingers. The rain, now a blinding sheet of water, lashed down with relentless fury, and then, with a final deafening roar, the floodwaters surged over the rooftop, engulfing Thomas in their cold embrace. He felt himself being pulled down into the darkness. He struggled against the current, his lungs burning, his limbs heavy. But it was no use. The water closed over his head and he was gone. Silence descended upon the flooded landscape. The storm, as if exhausted from its fury, began to subside. The rain eased to a drizzle, then stopped altogether. The wind died down, the clouds parted, and a sliver of moon peeked through the darkness. Below, the floodwaters swirled, carrying with them the debris of a village lost. Section 8. A Question of Faith. Thomas opened his eyes. He found himself standing in a field of ethereal light, a gentle breeze rustling through what seemed like stalks of pure energy. Before him stood a figure of immense warmth and light. Where am I?" Thomas stammered, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "You are home," the figure replied, a voice like the chiming of 1,000 bells. "But the flood," Thomas faltered, the memory of the raging waters still fresh in his mind. "You are safe now," the figure reassured. "But why?" Thomas cried out, his voice filled with anguish. "Why wasn't I saved? I had faith, I believed." The figure regarded him with infinite compassion. "Thomas," the voice said softly, "faith without action is not truly faith. It was not my hand you refused, but the hands of those sent to help you. Each offer of aid was a test, a chance to trust, to have faith in something other than your own understanding." Section 9. A New Dawn. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow upon the flooded landscape. The waters had receded, leaving behind a trail of devastation, but amidst the wreckage, a single stalk of wheat pushed its way through the mud and debris, reaching for the sky. Life, tenacious and resilient, would find a way. The villagers, those who had heeded the warnings, would return. They would rebuild their homes, their lives, their community, and in the rising sun, in the fresh scent of the earth, they would find hope. The flood had taken much, but it had also offered a profound lesson. The importance of trust, the power of community, and the understanding that sometimes letting go is the bravest act of all.